The problem that many Bitcoiners have with the US dollar is that that unit of value that we've constructed in our mind has changed to the downside in terms of its ability to exchange for something of value increasingly over time. We have a saying in Bitcoin, and that is, you're ready to buy Bitcoin when you're ready to admit that you were wrong about Bitcoin. We're required to be financial wizards to be able to calculate our future planning because of the unit that we're forced to use fluctuates in value and in its ability to command durable goods.
Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions and answers to questions do not involve the rendering of personalized investment advice, but are limited to the dissemination of general information. A professional advisor should be consulted before implementing any of the options presented. Encompass More Asset Management LLC is a registered investment advisor with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and only transacts business in states where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements.
There are a few things out there more volatile than old Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I think I'm an expert in some things, not a lot of things, a couple things. I think probably one of the best things that I'm an expert in is knowing that I'm not an expert.
Yeah, that's a good skill to have, right?
Right. And you know, there's I think a timely conversation to be had around Bitcoin because there's a concept. A lot of people talk about like the fourth turning, like you know, I don't know if you've heard of that at all.
Yes, I have.
I'm sure you have. I don't know if I even asked. But this idea that the government is going to print money and I hear people talk about like the destruction of the dollar, inflation, as you know, was obviously running really hot. It's kind of come down now, but there's a lot of talk about a lot of different things, right? Like I think for the first time in my lifetime, right, it's really coming into effect, this conversation around like what even is money, what is value, where do we invest, because it just seems like the market's overvalued. You know, gold, is that a good play? Should we own Bitcoin? Should we not? And it really leads to this question for most people. And I would say like most people that are younger have a little bit better maybe handle on it or feel more comfortable with it, with the idea of how it works. But a lot of the people that we work with that are closer to retirement age or in retirement, it's a really foreign concept to them. Like, what is this funny? I mean, they just zeros and ones in a computer. How does that work? You know, it's like, what do you even own? How do you get it? And so, you know, it's just, and then you have like, you know, Warren Buffett, if I could buy all the Bitcoin in the world for $20, I wouldn't buy it, you know? And what's kind of funny on that is, ironically, if you could buy it for $20, I wouldn't want to buy it either if I could buy all the Bitcoin in the world for $20, because then you understand that. Yeah. But I think that's for a different reason than why Warren was saying it, you know, old Uncle Warren. Anyways.
But if you had the chance to buy all the Michelangelos on Earth, would you do that?
All the Michelangelos?
Yeah, all of the art that Michelangelo produced.
For $20.
Sure. For $50.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. $50 is a little bit different. I was thinking $20. I'd be willing to spend $20 on a big burrito on the way over here. So maybe I'd take a whack at it, you know, but
it's just a thought. It's a thought exercise, right? What would you be willing to buy everything of?
Yeah. Well, I think I don't want to lose the listeners here this early, but the short answer on it is I wouldn't buy all the Bitcoin for $20 because I would own all of it. There would be no transaction or price discovery going on beyond that. And thus I have to sell it to somebody else for $21 or more going forward. And if I control all of it, it's really easy for somebody else to just go create another new Bitcoin that gets distributed in my Bitcoin. No one wants my Bitcoin anymore. There's a new Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I would have a concern about buying all of the Bitcoin.
Yeah. So you identified one of the many properties of Bitcoin that's important to understand for anybody trying to learn and wrap their head around it. And that is this idea that what is money? What is this thing? Is a careful balance between something that is scarce or limited or finite, but at the same time is wanted or desired. in a way that it has tradable value. It has a currency effect to it. So my definition of money, because you kind of asked, just like for the first time, we're really thinking about what money is. My definition of money really comes down to what is the most sellable good? What is the thing that you can sell the easiest? And which thing in the world, whatever that may be, iPhones, gasoline, US dollars, Bitcoin, the most saleable good, which one of those goods has the largest network of understanding of what that thing is? Because presumably, if the larger the network, the better price or value you will command from that network, because you have a wide distribution of individuals that want it. It makes it desirable.
Yeah.
And that makes it very easy to exchange. And so for the what is money conversation, or to start this off in terms of what are we dealing with here? What is exactly money? We have to identify some of the properties of money that make money money. Like, what are those things? And it's always fun to ask, like, when you use the US dollar, what properties does the US dollar have that creates value for you?
Yeah.
Answer the question. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's just think rationally about the US dollar, $100 bill.
Yep.
What about that thing makes it worth something to you?
Yeah. Universally accepted. Contracts are largely denominated in it, so I can settle my debts with it in a predetermined or specified denomination of it.
Yeah.
It is the most widely accepted currency in the entire world.
Love that, right? It is.
Yep. There's some interesting stuff for people like went to South America and went on trips, and they wanted to, show that gold was the answer, and people would want gold, and no one wanted their gold. They wanted the dollars. And so the guy ended up having to sell his Rolex watch to get cash dollars. And that was the only way he could pay for stuff, is they wanted US dollars. Right. And so I think, like the usability of it, the understanding, the stuff that I want to buy tends to be priced in US dollars, right?
Okay, that's good. It makes it easy for you to make an exchange.
Low friction costs. Yeah.
In your brain, you already have a calculation of value in comparison. So you can say, how many lamps at Target can I buy for $200? And you can kind of get an idea, I think I know how many lamps I can get for that much. Or a hamburger at McDonald's. You already have done that calculation hundreds of times in your head because you've experienced that. And most people don't understand that we do this value exchange in our heads every day with everything we do. When you go to Walmart and you pick up this bottle of water right here, right? And we look at the bottle of water's packaging, we see how many, the quantity, and we look at the unit value and we say, am I willing to sell my dollars for this water? And that's what people don't really think about, is you're actually selling US dollars for Big Macs. You're selling dollars for DVDs, or selling, I just dated myself, but you're selling dollars for things, right?
Yeah.
So what is the most sellable good? There's a good chance I can take my iPhone 13 down to Maverick and probably exchange a few gallons of gas for it pretty easily with somebody at the pump. So does that make the iPhone 13 money or currency?
I'm gonna argue no on that, like, just for sake here. So it's the old adage and book. It's like our dollar, your problem, right? So this is the same thing that prevents like the BRICS currencies from ever actually taking off, which is it's fine that you can make this other currency and you want to exchange oil in it, but at the end of the day, the calculation still always is convert that currency to dollars, and that dollar and oil's priced in dollars. So you have to figure out everything's relation to dollars. So if you take your iPhone 13 down to the Maverick and say, I want, hey, somebody give me, 15 gallons of gas in my car for this iPhone, the calculation they're doing in their head is that iPhone's worth $300. $300 is more than it's going to cost me to fill up, convert dollars into gasoline. Pure, profit play. Sure, I'll do it because I'm going to immediately then go and revalue my, net worth, or on now I don't have, the $45 in gas, but I have this $300 iPhone, right? It all goes back to pricing everything in dollars. And or they're going to convert the iPhone $2 and say, I spent $45. I sold, in your terms, I sold $45 for, however many gallons of gas. I got this iPhone, and now I'm going to sell that iPhone to receive back $300.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's no question in the United States, and especially for you and I in America, that the dollar network and the understanding of the dollar is so pervasive that we fundamentally do our calculations much like a language, use the English language to figure out or to compute rationally what the value of an item is. But for a long history of humanity, that always wasn't the case, right? The US dollar hasn't always existed, and it does require people to be able to make a calculation between two durable goods as to what their value are. And so like the value of a bottle of water in, let's say, the desert after 3 days of a lot of heat, or let's say a bottle of water in Disney World, inside the gates of Disney World, it has a much different value than it does outside of Disney World or outside of the desert. So again, we still do a calculation. In the United States, we use dollars to kind of do some equation. But that's increasingly becoming more difficult, and that's because of inflation. You kind of tapped into that for a second. But one of the hardest things about the current dollar as it is today is that we use it as a measuring tool, as you alluded to determine value, to determine exchange, to plan our future. But the problem that many Bitcoiners have with the US dollar is that unit of value that we've constructed in our mind has changed to the downside in terms of its ability to exchange for something of value increasingly over time. So what do I mean by that? Let's say that I tasked you with planning for your family's retirement in 30 years. You're going to have 30 to 40 years to work, and then you're going to retire. Then you're going to live for another 30 years, and you may or may not have medical conditions. Who knows? You don't know what your monetary burden is going to be, but you're going to plan your retirement so well that you're going to be able to make sure that you live a comfortable retirement. So the challenge is now, okay, what do I save in order to retire in some future date? And what will that unit look like in the future? So imagine it just like a foot on a measuring tape. When you build a house, you have 16 inches between two studs, or you have 12 feet on your rafter, you name it. So you're using this unit of measurement, and you're trying to measure and say, in the future, I'm going to need X amount of these units to survive or to retire. And the problem is the value of that unit, or the actual empirical nominal value of that unit, is fluctuating in its ability to exchange for a durable good, so much so that it's not reliable for my future. I can't look 20 years in the future and say reliably that this $10 bill is going to buy the same amount of bottled waters or hamburgers or the same amount of apps on the App Store as it does today. And therein lies the problem with tasking an entire nation, or for the world for that matter, tasking him with the challenge of planning for the retirement with a unit of planning, a measurement unit that constantly changes. So if you're building that house and the plans call out for 32 feet, imagine every time you pulled out that measuring tape and you pulled 1 foot, imagine if you pulled it out and that 1 foot equaled 16 inches. Then it equaled 12 and 2 years later. Then all of a sudden it equaled 17 inches. And we got a real problem, because if you can't reliably plan the amount of units you're going to need in your future, especially decades in your future, how are you expected to not have any degree of anxiety that you're going to be able to pay for that medical condition, that you're going to be able to hand something down to your children, that you're going to be able to finally pay off the house and maybe enjoy those books every day rather than going and burning your hours as a greeter at Walmart? So one of the reasons why Bitcoiners really zoned in on making something that is inflation proof, or this idea that it is deflationary and not inflationary in nature, was this idea of being able to rely on its unit being the same across space and time. So 1 Bitcoin here equals the same amount of 1 Bitcoin in China in terms of 1 out of 21 million Bitcoin. That's how many Bitcoin are on the network, right? So it'll always equal that because the actual protocol states that that's what it's going to be. If I own 21 Bitcoin or 200, let's say if I own 210,000 Bitcoin, I own 1% of the entire network of Bitcoin. So I can reliably measure the amount of that unit against the total issuance of that thing. With the dollars, it's much harder for us to do that because number one, we don't know how many dollars currently exist in the world. As much as everybody thinks that they can tell us some roundabout M1 money supply number, the fact is they don't know. And the fact is they keep printing at different intervals, whether that was, I remember 2008, 2007. Okay. I remember the great financial crisis and I remember the bank bailouts after that point. I remember what happened to our monetary value, the actual value of a dollar. And I remember the inflation after that. And then more recently in your lifetime, in my lifetime with COVID.
Well, I remember the GFC. But
okay, you do remember the GFC. Okay. A lot of people were very young. I mean, if you're in your 30s, you're probably pretty young when that was happening. So maybe the understanding.
It's a side effect of growing up in the business.
So yeah, exactly. So you would have researched that. But most people, what they remember is losing their home because they couldn't make the payment. Point being is after that is when the real effects creeped in, which was the value of the US dollar changed in terms of its ability to command real goods or durable goods. It took more dollars to buy a house. It took more dollars to buy hamburgers. It took more dollars to buy water. So that effect right there, how much more? Like how many more dollars did I need from that one printing event? And then comes COVID. They print 35% of all US dollars ever in existence within 6 months. And not only did we print, but every other fiat currency in the world printed too. So what happened after that? CPI inflation was measured 6, 7, 8%, 9% a year. If you don't believe CPI and you look at real inflation, that might have been as high as 14%. And so the net effect of this and where I'm going, and the point of all this is we're required to be financial wizards to be able to calculate our future planning because of the unit that we're forced to use fluctuates in value and in its ability to command durable goods. That net effect causes a lot of chaos. We can't plan that $100,000 salary 30 years from now is going to be enough. We can't plan that $2 million is going to be enough because no one knows what it's really going to be worth in the future. So that inflationary damage, brain damage, I call it, happens every day to us. And the net effect is everybody's working harder. Everybody's trying harder, but they don't quite sense why. Why is this more expensive? Why is this more expensive? And the incentive there is for us to spend our money faster. Because if I buy that Nautique boat this year, it's going to be cheaper because every year they go up by $50,000 a year. And it's not like the Nautique boat or the house or any of these things is built out of better wood, better steel. It's just that the value of the dollar is starting to depreciate against that thing.
Well, that's the Keynesian theory, right? So I always try to remind people, the Federal Reserve, they say like inflation's running hot. It's above our 2% target. And that 2%, so even if inflation wasn't, and I'm going to use some air quotes here, running hot, they still intend on there being inflation in the system, right? They will intentionally create 2% inflation if it's below that. And why? And the Keynesian theory was it greases the wheels of the economy because, and this is why deflation it's to offset the devastating, potentially economic devastating effects of deflation is exactly like you're saying. If I save my money, stuff becomes more expensive in the future. I have to outsave a growing issue, right?
The hurdle rate. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas like if there's deflation, right? If there's deflation and everything gets cheaper by 2 or 3% a year, right? You say, I won't buy anything this year. I'll just save. And the problem is if everyone just says, well, I'll just hoard my cash, right? I'll just save it. And I'll not participate in economic activity in the local economy until I, feel good and ready. Everyone loses their jobs, right? Like it grinds everything to a halt. That's what happened in the Great Depression. And that deflationary impulse is what, Ben Bernanke supposedly studied so hard and was, scared to death about trying to make sure that we avoided in 2008. And so that's what's built into the system is that inflationary impulse. And it does exactly like you're doing, right? It forces people to want to spend the money because things will be more expensive. If I don't buy it now, it's going to get more expensive, right?
Yeah. And not just want to spend, they're forced to spend.
Well, I think there's alternatives. I think the uneducated person feels forced to spend.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say this. I don't know. I'll just put a pin in that thought maybe.
No, you're good. Like, look, if we could plan, if we could reliably look at the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell and say, you're going to deliver 2% calculated, measured every year, year over year. You're not going to mess with the CPI. You're not going to change out the basket of goods to make it look this way or that way.
Yeah.
We really have a true reliable measure. Then we could actually plan, right? We could actually make plans for my future, for your future. We could know when enough is enough. I could retire now if I wanted to. I can continue to work if I want to, but I could actually plan.
Yeah.
The alternative for that is the US dollar has lost 98% or 99% of its value since 1900.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So that means if you bought a mansion in Miami or let's say you bought it in Newport for $1 million, or $100,000 in 1900, today that mansion may be worth $46 million or $100 million, right? In terms of the same dollars. But if you took that 100K and you threw it in your mattress or stuck it in a safe and you waited that 100 years and you pulled it out, you would still only have 100K. So the problem I have with this again is most people do not understand that because of inflation, the value of their savings, the value of their unit of measure that they use day in, day out, is programmatically designed to lose 2% value a year. Mm-hmm. All the money in my wallet right now, all the money in my Wells Fargo account right now, all the money that I have saved under my mattress is programmatically designed by declaration from the Federal Reserve to lose 2% a year.
Minimum.
And when you think of it that way, you start asking yourself, wait a second. I worked hard for this. I sweated for this. I spent time away from my family and my children because of this. What makes it possible for these people to extract? And where does this money go that is lost 2% each year? You and I have to live it within the bounds of the sweat of our brow or the calories that we consume. We change it into mechanical energy and we go work for a company and they give us dollars in exchange. Anytime our U.S. government or any other government for that matter has ever needed money and didn't have enough, all they have to do is cover the cost of the paper and cover the cost of the ink involved.
Well, they got to cover the cost of fiber in the keyboards now.
Okay, so there you go. You got to have someone press the print button.
Yeah.
The point is you and I are buying Wheaties each day to power our bodies, to change that energy into some type of unit of value to plan for our future. Our U.S. government is not bound by that particular constraint. If they need money, they print.
Well, and in today's world, no government is, right? There is not a currency out there, fiat currency at least, that is limited in supply. Like there's not the Swiss franc.
Yep.
As good of a currency as it may be, bless their hearts, it's not on the gold standard. They too can just print more if they so please, right?
Yeah. Fiat currency is a declarative currency. I declare that this is the U.S. dollar. This is what we're using, and they have control of it, the monetary policy of that unit.
Yeah, but what I'm highlighting is every currency is that way. So it's not that the U.S. is doing some dirty slide trick that no one else knows or understands. In fact, it's probably quite the opposite. It's that they all understand the dirty slide trick, and they're all doing the dirty slide trick, right? Of print more money, which is, some people describe it as that hidden tax, right?
Yeah. And that's why I think that's why we're upset, and that's why we're fed up. No one's disputing fiat currencies and government's ability to print fiat. And but not everybody knows that trick. That's the point. They're being tricked and they don't understand why.
But if your problem with the dollar is this trick, you know, the answer isn't another fiat currency, right? It is not to say, well, the euro's better, or, you know, the Korean, the Korean
yuan, the franc,
none of these are better. Yeah. They all have the inherently same issue. That is your fundamental concern with the U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
In fact, I truly think the U.S. dollar is actually the best of all of them if you're going to have a fiat currency. It
absolutely is. No, we benefit the most.
The other ones are questionably worse, right?
Yeah.
Like even worse. Yeah. Now, there's always opportunity in the fluctuations, and that's a whole different conversation. But I think people still then are yearning for the answer. And I think that's where people historically went to gold, right? Like we used to be on the gold standard, and the government couldn't print dollars because that dollar represented a claim on, you know, a little slice of gold in the vault at Fort Knox or whatever.
You got it. Yeah, you can't print gold.
Yeah, you can't print gold. In the future, we might be able to mine it out of an asteroid. Well, that will be interesting.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you raise a great point, right? We can't print it, but what could we do? We could grab a pitchfork or an axe, whatever.
Yeah.
And we could go out to California with everybody else during the gold rush, and we could put hard labor to work. And proportionally with the amount of work that we put into the ground, presumably if we're lucky and we're in a good spot and have a good claim, we could extract gold out of the ground, and we can exchange that energy that person spent each day eating the food that they did and putting the mechanical energy into the ground to find these gold nuggets. They could presumably exchange that as a representative of a representation of their work. And that right there kind of controlled how much gold hit the market day to day, year to year, because it was controlled by the amount of work that individuals could put into the ground.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it highlights an interesting point about gold, which is why I think Warren Buffett wasn't a fan of gold, right? Where he said, I have no interest in gold because it doesn't do anything, right? And I think the point that he didn't highlight, but I think he was thinking, is that there's still an inflationary impulse to gold because there's still gold mines in operation. There's still more gold coming out of the ground. Not a lot, but there is a minor amount that the gold supply, the total gold in circulation, or, you know, a known circulation in the world, does increase slightly every year.
2 to 3% a year is what its inflationary rate is.
Because you can't destroy gold, right? Like, I mean, the best we got is if Elon Musk starts loading Teslas up with it and sending them into outer space, right? And then it's gone until somebody figures out how to bring it back to the earth.
We drop at the bottom of the ocean, maybe unretrievable at some point.
I think even at that point, it's actually retrievable, but
you got it. We don't know,
Yeah,
right? We don't know what the future holds. We may be able to get it.
Right. Anyways, my point is that there's still a slight inflationary impulse to gold. And so Warren would say, I don't want to hold gold because there's no productivity to it. And there's this underlying, you know, inflation potential still from just new gold being mined, right?
Yeah.
And so then you okay, still not, I think the philosophy here, right? I think this is a philosophical conversation in nature. The philosophy still is, well, what the heck is it then? Because it's not silver, because silver, you know, same thing, right? Less scarce, so maybe. Can't be copper. There's way too much copper in the world to start trading that as. I mean, has anyone heard of the penny?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so, okay, fiat currency's out, gold's out, palladium's unreasonable because there's simply just not enough.
Maybe not enough of it.
You know what I mean? It's not enough to even have to circulate and have that wide adoption like you talked about early on. And I think that's where Bitcoin kind of came from, right? This search for an alternative. to all these things.
Yeah, you very succinctly went over the monetary history of the earth. We started out with exchanging things like spices and salts and small tools, let's say seashells and arrowheads, things like that. We exchanged them directly, one person with another. Because of that exchange, we were able to function in small communities. Once the communities grew a little bit, there became an issue, a friction issue, and that's called the coincidence of wants. That's when 2 or 3 or 4 people come together, and no one in that circle of exchange can exactly exchange 2 goods perfectly. Somebody catching fish may want a house, but the person building the house may not want any fish. So they can't necessarily do a transaction with each other directly. We need a third party or a fourth party, depending on how complex the actual transaction is. So that coincidence of wants basically brought in the technology of currency or money in the center. If we put a unit of value in between all of the participants in the network of a market, and we all valued it similar, then what we could do is reliably use that currency as a saving mechanism to save up enough money to exchange to buy that house. Because if by the time you saved up enough fish, they'd be very stinky and moldy, you wouldn't be able to exchange them, right? So the idea was currency reduced this friction between market participants and relieved the coincidence of wants, because this unit of value in the middle could be saved. So then it's like, and you mentioned, can't use copper, can't use silver, can't use some of these other things. Fact is, we did use them at one time. They were monetary. They had monetary premiums to them because they were durable, they were portable, and they were valued. And those 3 things allowed somebody to leave Turkey and walk across the Silk Road or walk into Europe and make an exchange for goods that otherwise didn't exist in Asia or didn't exist in the Middle East. And you could do that with these tokens of value. And each one of those things was really good until somebody figured out how to, quote unquote, print them or produce them at a higher level. Copper was very difficult, or bronze was very difficult to get out of the ground at one point. Yeah. Modern manufacturing technology all of a sudden allows somebody to produce large amounts of that, and they can do it at a marginal cost that's less than somebody that worked really hard with the pickaxe. So next thing you know, there was a realignment or a revalue adjustment of that particular token. And over time, money has subtly improved over time. And we got to gold because, why? We talked about it, 2 to 3% inflation, meaning it was really hard to get, really hard to accumulate, to purify, to refine. And because it was so hard to find, it became a very good store of value. And from there, what did we do? Well, we started filling bags up with gold, and it got heavy to carry. So if you wanted to do business between Europe and Asia, all of a sudden loading all your gold up onto a ship and just sailing the seas against all the storms and everything, that became a real risky prospect. So then came the era of ledgers, right? 2 banks could hold a ledger and operate on an internal network between each other of trust that would allow them to say, I owe you and you owe me. And we wouldn't have to necessarily move that gold immediately and all the time. So gold ended up in the vaults because it was safer there than from Robin Hood and his den of thieves trying to always get, the tax collector as he's going through the forest. The tax collector would simply carry a note from one bank to another stating that, hey, Bank of New York has X amount of bars of gold, and we're going to be transferring this to you in the future in exchange for this business transaction. So that was a technology improvement upon money as well. We went from the salts to the metals. We went into the gold. That became the premier monetary asset. And then it became this great system of ledgers where I could carry around a piece of paper or a note, a gold note, in a much more private way than a heavy bar of gold. And now I could reduce the risk of moving that gold. And the cost of moving that gold with all the guards and all that could go way down. Money all of a sudden started to do this technological improvement again and again. We went to credit cards where we could settle those ledgers in a lot faster interval. So we're looking at 30, 60, 90 days for American Express, Visa, MasterCard to be able to settle or finalize transactions, meaning finalizing after no chargebacks, right? Final settlement. And we went from those dollar representations of gold to fiat currency to checks, promises to pay, trust again, to this electronic transfer that had quicker settlement. And then we get to this point where we haven't figured out to send something of value digitally, because the whole idea of the internet was fantastic. But the problem is for the same reason that the music industry had an issue or any other industry, software industry had issues in the beginning with allowing copies of their software to be sold online. Remember, you used to be able to get the CD for your Windows machine or the Windows software, and it had this little holographic proof of purchase, right? Proof of authenticity. The reason why they were doing that is because when you sent something from one IP address to another IP address, it literally left a copy on the original computer of that thing of value. So Microsoft couldn't send that thing to that other computer without multiple copies being made really easily. Well, along comes Bitcoin. And this changes everything. Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009, October 31st, writes the white paper on Bitcoin. And for the first time, through a lot of different engineering feats digitally and a lot of incentives in the structure, was able to align different pieces of technology from lots of different people in a way that could reliably transfer from one person to another value without the copy of that thing remaining on the original address. So now we can actually transfer something at the speed of light without that copy, verifiably without that copy being rehypothecated, duplicated, or printed. So again, all of these things that you mentioned, all these different things, it can't be copper, can't be palladium, can't be. The fact is, a lot of these things did serve as currencies, but we have arrived to a new technological advancements, which is called Bitcoin, which is the digitization of value. And for the first time, well, it's been 15 years now, we're able to show that particular schema or mechanism has been provably reliable. So that's the exciting thing that Bitcoin delivered to the world, was that ability to do that. There's a lot of other reasons that make it a very powerful currency. It's fungible, it's divisible, it's permissionless, it's scarce, right? It's digital. These things, all these little properties are enhancements upon what we already had as money. It's more portable than gold because you don't have to carry it. I have this my son has a Bitcoin high school club, and he did this incredible demonstration. We bought $300 of pennies into the classroom, and we loaded up these pennies in a backpack. I pulled out my wallet. I gave $300 in USD to one of the students and said, "Get on the wall over there." I gave the next student a credit card and said, "Get on the wall over there." I gave the next student a Bitcoin wallet and a QR code to be able to transfer value, $300 worth, get over there. And then my son put on the backpack. And all their task was to take the value from that side and to be able to get it on the other side of the classroom where there was their peers were sitting on the other side. They had a partner that they were supposed to transfer this money to. And as you can imagine, there was a real component of physics. There's a real component of just actual mass moving across the room that actually took energy. And it was clear that each one of those had a different interval from getting point A to point B. And it was clear that Bitcoin became, it settled instantly. It settled faster than the person running $300 across. So the point is that each of these technological improvements upon money has produced this particular weird, odd tool called Bitcoin. And we have a saying in Bitcoin, and that is, you're ready to buy Bitcoin when you're ready to admit that you were wrong about Bitcoin. For a long time, I was wrong. I didn't read about it. I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. But it wasn't until I did the deep dive and did the homework and understood what money really is and its various properties that I discovered Bitcoin has superior properties. And that's why over time, it's going to win out that battle or that contest or that competition for value storage.
So Bitcoin is just this digital thing, right? What makes it Bitcoin versus me typing the word Bitcoin in Microsoft Word and saying, I've got Bitcoin too?
Yeah, good question. So there's a lot of things in our life today that even 10 years ago weren't necessarily fully understood. They're digital. For a long time, a photograph was a piece of paper that had ink on it, or a music track was on an LP that you listened to, a physical item. Books for a long time was an actual, hardbound book. You bought it at the bookstore or went to the library. And money for a long time was, gold coins was a representation. What makes Bitcoin different than, let's say, US dollars and the current system we have? Today, most people pull out their Visa card when they want to buy a hot dog at the stadium, or they send some Venmo cash to their daughter when they're asking for $20 to go to Target. Those two actions aren't that dissimilar from what Bitcoin is. The thing that makes Bitcoin different is the number of units that are in existence. We know definitively, absolutely, certainly, and with the ability to audit the number of Bitcoin or units that exist in all of the universe. We know that there's 21 million units of these. Why do we know this? We know this because Bitcoin is a script that is like a piece of software, just like TCP/IP is for the internet, or just like for your web browser, you have HTML. This is a script and a protocol that people can read the actual script like rules of a game like Monopoly. We sit down to play Monopoly, you and I, we get the pieces out, we read the rule book. As long as you and I both have consensus or agree on the rule book, you and I can play that game and it can be fun. But imagine if those rules change at any given time at a whim or however we want to, the game loses its ability for strategy. It loses the ability for you to win or for you to lose because the rules could be changed. All of a sudden, the person that goes bankrupt first is the winner. Imagine if that was the rule. So what Bitcoin delivered was a rule book that could be given to everybody. And it simply says, if you're going to join this network, if you're going to be a part of the Bitcoin network or transact with it or use it, you have to follow these rules. So to follow the rules, you take the rule book, you load it into your computer, and this rule book helps enforce the rules, helps keep the rules sound. Make sure that they're not changed or they're not edited or they're not manipulated in any way, right? And as long as you're playing by the same rules that I'm playing by, and as long as the US government or that corporation or that trust or that mobster or that whoever wants to be on this network plays by those rules, we can all guarantee and ensure that the network will run according to those rules. So what Bitcoin essentially presents itself as a protocol, a network. What is a network? A network is just a group of people that decide to come together and say, we're going to do this. There's networks of people that trade Pokemon cards, right? There's networks of people that trade US dollars, right? Probably the largest network on earth, right? Mm-hmm. So Bitcoin has its own network. It's just defined by whoever chooses to use Bitcoin, right? And then you have this strict number of units that we know that if I accumulate, like I said in the beginning, some portion of that total, I will know exactly what ratio I own overall. Contrast that with gold. If I said, how much gold is there in the earth? We'd pause for a second. We don't know. How many asteroids have gold on it? How much is the bottom of the ocean? We don't know. How many dollars are there? We don't know. How much stock? How many shares of Apple stock will there be in the next 5 years? Well, we don't know. It depends if the board wants to issue more. So the problem is all of the rules surrounding all these current monetary systems and these tokens of value that we use seem to have maybe not necessarily a backdoor, but seem to have fluid rules to them that can be manipulated, changed, or just outright thrown out when they want to. And so what Bitcoin is basically a trust machine, an ability for us to go to a network and trust that this rule set that's being run will never change. Therefore, I can actually plan. So it's very similar to like physics or mathematics. If you designed a plane or submarine that had a leak in it or had a hole in it or had some release of energy or had some breach in its hull, it wouldn't be possible for that thing to function as it is. And so Bitcoin as a network and as a protocol is a reliable source or a way for you to trust that if you transact on this thing, that it will continue to function the same way. So now I can actually build upon it. I can plan on it, and I can make sure that over time, this thing is reliable.
Yeah, but what about the friction costs? Like, I think sometimes for me, that seems to be the elephant in the room on Bitcoin, right? Like, buy a $6 cup of coffee and pay $100 in transaction costs to get it, So, how usable is it really? Like if I want a $6 coffee or soda, we're in Utah, right? So everyone buys $6 swigs.
Yeah, exactly. $6 swig.
You just pull out your, pull out the old Visa card, swipe away and boom, and you're seeing a little bit more increase now. Like there's people saying, hey, it's not $6. It's if you're going to pay with your credit card, it's 6 plus, 3.5%. You pay the cost that Visa is incurring on all of this, right? Like you pay that friction cost. But it's still relatively minor, and it's scaled to the size of the purchase, right? So, if I buy a $10 lunch and it's 3.5%, I can pay 35 cents, right? If it's a $10,000 car and I want to pay with a credit card, they're going to charge me $350, right? Like it's scaled to the purchase. The way that I understand Bitcoin works is it is not scaled to the purchase. It's just there's kind of this cost of running a transaction on the ledger. And so it doesn't matter if you're buying, the $5, drink at Maverick or, the $10,000 car, the cost of a transaction is the cost of a transaction. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, it's a very common question that people have when they first explore Bitcoin and how it functions. One of the incentives of the Bitcoin network is obviously people run computers called nodes and miners in the Bitcoin network to actually conduct the transactions day to day that Bitcoin that take place on the Bitcoin network. Obviously, this takes energy. This takes computers. It's no different than the amount of real estate, computers, labor, and things that you would find commonly at a bank or a corporate office of American Express. The fact is, most of us haven't really exercised any degree of thinking about how much it really does cost to run a financial network of, let's say, Visa or MasterCard, or even the US dollar network. It's always a fun thought experience to think of, the only thing I ever see built anymore in new places, it seems like, is car dealerships and banks. It seems like there's a bank on every corner. That's a piece of real estate. That's a very nice, building that they build. It's filled with very qualified people. And they're sitting behind a desk, 300 days, 400 days a year, 280 days a year, whatever it is. They're there waiting for you to come in and do business. All of that infrastructure, all the cashiers, all the American Express, all the terminals, all the computers, those all are part of the fiat costs of doing business or network costs of these businesses. And so while for the end user, we may be able to calculate, hey, Square only charges 80 cents per transaction for merchant fees, it's not necessarily the full picture of what it actually costs in terms of running a network like this. Imagine just collecting taxes I mean, you have accounting firm after accounting firm, regulatory bodies, you have the IRS, you have all of this infrastructure all around interpreting rules and figuring out how much somebody owes at the end of the year. And so I guess what I'm trying to say with that is Bitcoin does charge some money to be able to run these transactions on somebody else's computer. But that's an incentive for those people to allocate capital and to allocate operational costs to the network.
Who gets the money?
Yeah, so
like if I swipe a card, Visa gets the money. They run operations at Visa. They pass it through to the shareholders. Is there a Bitcoin Visa?
Yeah, good question. So blocks. Let's talk about Bitcoin's transactions. Okay, what happens with a Bitcoin transaction? What essentially happens is you have a wallet, a Bitcoin wallet that has, let's say, some Bitcoin in it. And this is a great thing that most people don't really understand, that all of the Bitcoin in existence, all 21 million units, really exists in the cloud. It exists on the protocol. Remember that script we talked about. Okay. So that 21 million is constantly this digital limit, upper bound inside the protocol that's constantly referenced. Then you have inside the Bitcoin network individual wallets. Each of these wallets have a certain amount of Bitcoin in them. Collectively, all the wallets in existence, if you added them all up together, you would effectively be able to come up with your 21 million units.
Okay.
That's how we audit that. So these wallets, one to another, transact with each other, and they broadcast that transaction to the network. They do that simply like just sending a message. It's no different than a small text message that says, Wallet A is paying Wallet B a certain amount of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So when that happens, it goes into a place called a memory pool. This is just a temporary holding location for every transaction that comes in on the network. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of transactions come in and they sit in the mempool. Then you have these computers that are actually tasked with processing these transactions, or they get the opportunity to process the transactions. What they're doing is essentially waiting for the opportunity to be able to, or the privilege to be able to process 10 minutes worth of transactions from that mempool, from that memory pool, or that temporary holding place. So all of these computers worldwide called miners are all competing for the opportunity to be able to process these 10 minutes of transactions. Why? Because when you do a transaction on Bitcoin, you pay a small portion in miner fees. In addition to that, there's another incentive called a block reward. And it is a simple reward for the computer that wins the opportunity to process those transactions. Today, that block reward or that block subsidy is it is 3.125 Bitcoin. When Bitcoin started, it was 50 Bitcoin. At today's price, that's a lot of money, right? So what happens is every 4 years, this block subsidy reduces by 1/2. And you may say, well, why was there a block subsidy in the first place? Satoshi Nakamoto was very ingenious in the sense that how was he going to get 21 million Bitcoin in the hands of a large network in the future, distributed in a way that's just and equitable? Why not just give it to his best buddies, right? So the idea was, if anybody brings a miner or a computer, actually goes to Best Buy, buys a computer, and dedicates it to the Bitcoin network as a miner, they will get the opportunity. If they win the opportunity in somewhat of a mathematical lottery, if they win this opportunity, they will get 50 Bitcoin during the first 4 years of its existence, and they get all the transaction fees from all the transactions that they can fit in this ledger entry. Every 10 minutes, there is these ledger entries that occur. So imagine first 10 minutes of Bitcoin. There's a few hundred transactions that occur. There was probably actually 10 or 20. It wasn't actually that many, not even that many, probably a couple. But the point is, there was a computer out there that was running this protocol, this mining protocol. It won the privilege to be able to publish that block of transactions. And in exchange, its incentive, its block subsidy was the 50 Bitcoin.
Got $5 million worth of Bitcoin.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that was back in 2009, back when Bitcoin was pennies. So it really wasn't that valuable. So the point is, fast forward 4 years from that, the next block subsidy went from 50 to 25, then 12.5, then 6 point. Then you get down to this point where now that subsidy every 10 minutes for the computer that wins the opportunity to publish those transactions gets 3.125 Bitcoin. That's, that's $300,000 to $400,000 if you include the transactional fees as an incentive for you to dedicate power, computers to that network.
Okay. I know we're coming short on time, and this is a great conversation. How is the transaction fee determined? Like how is that? Is it a percentage of the transaction cost? Is it flat per transaction and it's already written to the protocol? You kind of give up this much of your coinage to make the transaction? How does that?
Yeah, so good question. Most of the time, you publish your transaction with a current value or some additional value incentive for a miner to grab your transaction out of the memory pool and include it into their block. The more money you put on your transaction, almost is like a priority ticket. The more you pay, the faster that the next computer that wins that 10-minute opportunity to publish that ledger, they're going to say, whoa, look at this one, and this one. They have a lot more transaction incentive fees to publish. So they'll take the big ones and they'll organize them in that block first because they want to maximize their opportunity. Remember, only one computer in the whole world gets the opportunity every 10 minutes to publish those transactions. So if you get that opportunity, if you win that lottery, you want to choose the highest incentivized transactions to maximize the amount of money that you're going to get because you presumably have worked for years or maybe a few months without getting any opportunity to publish.
Yeah. So there's computer like these miners out there. They could have thousands of computers that never actually successfully mine any Bitcoin at all.
100%. There are a lot of computers running today, all dedicating real CPU power and real electricity that may never ever hit the opportunity to actually publish a transaction and get a block reward or block subsidy. However, what's happening now is a lot of these miners, even the small guys like you and me in a garage that say we only have one machine, like the chances of us winning against
Disclosure,
the world,
I don't have any.
Okay. Well, the point is, even if we did, that small machine's chance of winning against these giant data centers is very small. So what do? We join a pool of miners, and all of those pools network together and collectively work towards winning that. And if we win, it just figures out, hey, how much power did Aaron dedicate to the network? How much hash power, how much CPU power did he dedicate to solving this problem? And proportionally pay out the block reward to that small miner based on how much power they dedicated to that problem.
So Bitcoin miners have figured out how to make a mutual fund of it.
Well, they're mutually working on finding gold. It's no different than somebody bringing a pickup truck, someone bringing a cat, and someone bringing a pickaxe, and they're all working on finding gold. And if someone finds the gold, we'll share it proportionally on how much work you bring to the table.
Sounds very characteristic of a security.
Yeah, well, it's the same as buying a business.
Which is not a bad thing.
Yeah,
I'm just like they figured out how to securitize, access to Bitcoin mining.
You're proportionally paying out the block reward on how much you contribute is just equitably distributing revenue.
Well, that's not any different than if I own a mutual fund that owns some Apple and some, Google and some Coca-Cola and whatnot. And, the more money you put into the mutual fund, the more shares you're able to buy as a fund. And so as those pay out, proportionally you get return relative to how much
you got it.
Portion of the
just
fund.
Fractionalizing the workload. Yeah.
It's just securitization, right? Yep. Not a bad thing. It's just interesting. Yeah. I think the last question I have, and then we probably got to wrap on this. Maybe I do a follow-up episode. So you have these halving cycles. Now you're talking about 3.125 Bitcoin gets rewarded. Presumably, and if I remember the halving cycle here was like early last year, was it? Or late last year?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You got it.
So in another 3.5 years, there's going to be another halving cycle. what is it? Was it going to be 1.7?
Yeah, for clarification, halving cycle 50, 25, 12.5, 6.25, right?
Yep.
It's just going to cut in half that block subsidy.
Yeah. So if the number of transactions increase, before the halving cycle can go, like, is there a possibility that we run out of Bitcoin being mined?
Yeah.
Before the halving cycle cuts it down to like where you're getting, 1/1000th of a Bitcoin to mine a block and does that introduce a risk of people saying, yeah, it's not worth mining anymore. I can't afford to run my rigs. I can't afford to pay the electricity for it. Right. Essentially, the lottery ticket has become too expensive to continue playing the game.
Yeah. No, exactly. In the year 2148, the last Bitcoin will be mined. It will be 0.00000001 Bitcoin, one Satoshi, 1/100 millionth of a Satoshi. That's when the last Bitcoin will be mined. It may be long after we die and potentially our children die. Presumably at that point, right, the scarcity of Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin continues to rise up and to the right. Number go up technology, and it continues to go. And we see that today because we measure value of Bitcoin not in just dollars, but you can see, in 2019, it took 64 Bitcoin to buy the average home in America. Now it takes 6 Bitcoin to buy the average home in America, right? So what's going to happen is as the scarcity component plays out of Bitcoin, as less and less Bitcoin get issued in the world, it will presumably become more valuable, just as if there's less and less gold or less and less dollars available. So think of it this way. Today, 450 Bitcoin are produced each day in the world for the entire world to consume. In a few short years, that will be cut in half, 225 Bitcoin. Each year subsequent halving that this occurs, the value of Bitcoin will continue to increase proportionately. And that's how we can plan in the future to know every 10 minutes we can audit how many in the world have been mined and how many are available for commerce or transactions. Right now, it's 19,892,000 Bitcoin, somewhere in that realm. So we have still 2 million Bitcoin that are dedicated in the future for miners supporting the network as a subsidy for their contribution.
It's a minor inflationary impulse to Bitcoin still.
That's it. It's a beautiful distribution model to send out less and less Bitcoin over time. And if you look at it, the first 4 years of Bitcoin, half of all Bitcoin was mined. Meaning the first 4 years, we had 10.5 million Bitcoin mined in those first 4 years. The next year, 5.25 million Bitcoin. So again, proportionately every 4 years, the amount gets cut in half in terms of total issuance outstanding to be distributed for miners as a block subsidy. These are two, I know we're wrapping up. We just barely tapped into just 2 or maybe 3 different fascinating components about Bitcoin, but this is much, much deeper than this. I want to make a recommendation to your listeners. If you want to learn more, I teach classes on Bitcoin. I have given hundreds of presentations, several podcasts. The best book you could possibly buy to learn about Bitcoin
say the Bitcoin Standard.
Is The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Onimus. Okay, it's available on Audible. You can get it for free PDF online if you want. But the point is if you really want to take a dive, and not only monetary history, but the understanding of Bitcoin's mechanics, and that's the book. That is the best book to be able to give you a comprehensive view of Bitcoin. I'm always available. I'm happy to talk about Bitcoin. I've done it now for 10 years plus, and I'm never going to stop. It's the most fascinating thing and best invention and most amazing invention to me that's ever happened in my lifetime. It's incredible. And I want people to really understand Bitcoin, not for just the nominal dollar equivalent value of what it is. Mm-hmm. It's a technological enhancement on money. And once you see that, you can't unsee it.
Well, we have a lot more to talk about, I think. but we will have to we'll have to continue the conversation.
Great.
So I appreciate you taking the time though today. I know we've been trying to get together to do this for a while. Coincidentally lines up now with Bitcoin hitting some new all-time highs over this last
123,000.
and
Wild.
so now it's going to come out with 100,000 other Bitcoin podcasts, but such is life.
Yeah.
So I've got a friend of mine, Mike Green, who's a little bit more skeptical of Bitcoin, I think, in nature. He's got some concerns. And I've got on the calendar a couple weeks from now, he's coming on to film and kind of give his take on the matter. And such is life. So probably Bitcoin will probably recede in price around that time, and it'll look like I'm a flip flopper. So I'm announcing now that it's all planned.
Price in USD.
Yeah, price in USD. Yeah,
Okay.
Anyways, I'm trying to. So for anyone listening, like Aaron, obviously is I would say a qualified expert on Bitcoin, very knowledgeable on the topic.
Thank you.
And I'm going to try to just help present kind of both sides here to people. And again, like my job in life is to help guide people and educate, not tell them. And I like to say to you, I don't like telling people what to think. I like trying to help them understand how to think.
I'm the same way.
And so like that's what makes these conversations so interesting to me. I think there's a lot of value in this entire Bitcoin conversation, if nothing else than the thought experiment around what the heck is money anyways, and what is wealth, and what are my assets really worth? Like, what does that even mean? I think is a phenomenal thought experiment to take yourself through. So appreciate you taking the time. And I'm glad that we spent a lot of the time on that piece, because I do think that's impactful no matter what somebody's ultimate take on Bitcoin itself is, right?
Yeah. I agree.
The initial thought experiment is super important.
It is important for all of us because money affects every facet of our lives.
Absolutely. So
okay.
Appreciate it, Aaron.
Thanks so much.
We'll see you around.
Yeah. See ya.